Robert Sands, we're back for another great chat. This lovely episode we're going to do on a term that I've only heard you mention. I've never heard this term until I heard it from you, and it was a term that made me kind of twitch. And it was a term where you were saying how we live in it do put me right, in a matriarchal society. And obviously me being me, it's like, matriarchal, what do you mean? It's all about men. So do please share some of the lovely things. We've just been having a chat before we came on, and do share some of those fantastic stories about the acceptance of people as they are.
So to be fair, you need to define some terms. And matriarchy, of course, there are matriarchal families that everybody knows where the mother rules the roost and the father is subordinate. So we might say, well, that's more of a patriarchal matriarchy. That's like a woman behaving like a man. So what is,
Yes.
what is the archy? The archy is rules or control. So a matriarchy would be the ascendancy or dominance of feminine values. And a patriarchy would be the dominance or imposition of masculine or patriarchal values. So if you think of it that way, then a matriarchy would be a love, acceptance-centered culture.
Wow.
It would be dominated by kindness, accommodation, love in the sense of protection. Safetyism would be a matriarchal value, which is, my thesis is that we're in an ascendancy of matriarchy. Now, that doesn't mean that the men aren't in political office and running things. That's another topic, but the values that are infusing the culture, in many cases, I would argue, are matriarchal. Let's take an example. Let's look at education. Education is dominated by women much more than it used to be.
True.
And that's a statistical fact, and that wouldn't necessarily prove that the educators are, let's say, overly accommodating. But I think probably children are hearing that kindness is the only way, and that acceptance of the child as they are is a maternal, let's intermix some terms, maternal, matriarchal. They're different, but they imply a type of value that is centered on kindness and acceptance rather than challenge, change, you must grow up, setting boundaries. You might attribute that to more of a masculine function, although there are plenty of boundary setting women. So it gets to the point that we're a mixture of masculine and feminine traits that are arbitrarily kind of defined in a list, but we're mixed creatures. So does that soften your reaction to the idea that we're an ascendant matriarchy?
It is. I find it. I know sometimes maybe I overuse the word in our chats, but I do find it quite profound, because it's not something that's talked about. And as you just said, the boundaries that come from the patriarchy, the paternal, and the love-based acceptance. What came up for me when you were talking about female teachers was, do you think in education and within the home, as people are developing, do you think that women are allowing their natural maternal instincts and that flow of love into children in the work in their schools as they teach, or even young adults and people in the adolescence? Does it actually flow, or is it discouraged in schools? Or what have you experienced with your clients or patients when you
So
experience?
my thought is kind of a baby in bathwater thought, that the core value of the maternal function is that universally sought, desired, and I'm getting a message, my internet connection's unstable, but that went away. So that the teachers are necessarily, particularly the teachers of young children, need to be accommodating and accepting, because we don't expect young children to change that much, because they're bound by their biological and neurological maturation. They're on a timeline. So if you overly expect children, that stresses them and they don't do well. So I think the proper place of the maternal function is in early education, early childhood, where acceptance and love and accommodation and forgiveness. So we look at our kids and we forgive them every day. They keep doing these things, but you keep forgiving them. They get a fresh start. Love gives them a fresh start every day because it has forgiveness attached to it, love and forgiveness. So these are all crucial. I think where it becomes a problem is when the child is told, for example, here's an error of the education system that relates to this. The self-esteem movement was full of, all you have to do is keep telling kids how great they are and what a great, everybody gets a trophy and everybody's wonderful, which is at odds. The kids know that's stupid. They'll talk about it. They'll say how stupid it is. Wow. Oh, absolutely. The kids know that this slathering on of praise, unearned praise, does not build self-esteem. Wow. It's a complete bust. Wow. But the educational, and I would argue that is a matriarchal failure, that it's a misapplication of the core loving function to keep telling kids, I love you no matter who you are, even if you misbehave, I love you, which is, oh, that's an okay message. But if you look at the major errors of the education system as a whole, it would be the self-esteem movement, I think, was a misapplication, over-application of the maternal function. So maybe that's matriarchy run amok or something. It's just a mistake.
Well, I would agree. I would totally agree with that. And what it made me think while you were explaining that is, I wonder if it's, again, so who comes up with this stuff? Is it some adult who was always, I don't know, never picked for the sports team, or was, always kind of getting the lowest grades? It makes you wonder who, it's like they're working through their own deep inner demons by passing laws that kind of are completely and utterly unhelpful, but it's helping them work through their own therapy of not being good at particular stuff at school. It's just bizarre. And have they realized it doesn't work? And so the first thing is, have they yet realized it doesn't work and stopped it? And then the second thing is, so these kids already know it's not right. So how do they kind of try and shift to make themselves think, well, I'm not accepting this? Or how does it basically show itself later on in life in the generation that grew up with that? You're getting a little trophy for being able to open the door. I heard that from a teacher once. They had like little certificates and trophies if you opened the door nicely and you didn't slam it. And, the most preposterous stuff that I'm sure just disempowers kids so immensely. Then you have disempowered adolescents and you have disempowered, disgruntled, frustrated adults. What's your experience in that?
Well, I mean, you've summed it up pretty well. I encounter a lot of young people and who have a false, inflated sense of self that's derived from being constantly told how wonderful they are, how the company, one example was a drug rep who consulted me when I was on a talking trip. She said, we have a colleague who's out of touch with reality. She thinks she's great. She thinks the company's lucky to have her, but she's not doing her job and blah, blah, you know, kind of, she gave this litany of poor performance and not understanding things. So I thought this is an example of a young girl who was told by her teachers and everybody how great she was, but she did not learn that from reality. She learned it from verbiage, words that went in. But this is the so-called self-esteem movement, is that self-esteem comes from being told you're great, when actually, without a doubt, self-esteem comes from the mastery of the world, that you gain confidence because you encounter the real world, you, whatever the domain is, educational, let's say mastery of mathematics or mastery of language and writing, that you just can't be told you're a great writer. You have to have a trial by fire. Yep. With actual people and actual feedback and actual failure. And this is why it's argued in sports that it's the failure that builds the great athlete. It's the struggling against failure, not the coach telling them how great they are. I mean, that doesn't help them in their game. It actually, it can hurt their ability because they have a falsely inflated sense of self. And we certainly know a lot of people like that who think they're great, but then when it comes down to it, they really don't perform well.
Well, you can say that. I mean, it's interesting. You look at the massive politicians around the world, and they truly think they're doing a great job. And you're like, are you mad? Are you, you know, is someone giving you medication because you've got some serious imbalance here? You know, and it's and why are they always in positions of power? I often think that people get promoted often because they're just yes people, and they never question anything. They never rebel. They never say this is wrong. And, you know, therefore you get a whole load of people in these top committees and top, like the CDC and stuff, that are, that they must, you know, they just have that kind of, I think I'm great. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say words, but I'm just thinking of Anthony Fauci, who's just ruined so many careers and stuff. And it'd be very fascinating to know his childhood and what kind of terrible mishaps he must have experienced for him to be, I truly think I would say he's got some kind of psychopath stuff. You know, he's like, you know, that, well, I don't know if it's psychopath or narcissist that just completely get, you know, it's not my fault, it's everybody else, change your story, you know, don't ever kind of take the blame, don't ever, and this is a mature bloke. It's like, when does it get sorted out? When do these people arrive at a place where they go, I think I'm a bit nuts and I really think I need some help?
Well, I won't comment on Fauci. I could, but I won't. Instead, I'll comment on my experience in the military. There was a concern expressed that the officer rating forms were inflationary.
Oh, okay.
And it was creating a problem of making it look like you walk on water. That was a term that if you're rating somebody, you want to make them look like they walk on water. But what that does is destroy the actual measurement of the best. And so what happens is it promotes accommodating people, yes men, go along to get along is another term. Get along to go along to get along, so that you become a culture of an accommodating and military, which we really don't need. You need strong individuals who will speak up in a debate. They have some basis for their comments, they have experience, and they have courage. And when there are big stakes at hand, You have people willing to come to the table and speak at the table as individuals, not just mouthing the politically correct. This is where accommodation and political correctness, and I could even argue that that's the ascendancy of the feminine into groups where everybody wants to agree. You have to have agreement.
Yeah.
Agreeableness is a feminine trait. Women are more agreeable than men by a large measure. Men are interested in ideas and things. Women are interested in people.
Yeah.
Now, does that mean that men have no interest in people? No, but if you take a group, the men are more over here looking at things and building machines and talking about ideas, and women are concerned about people and meeting needs. So those are complementary functions. They don't need to be competitive. So back to your concern about why do incompetent people rise to the top is a historical problem. A lot of very mentally ill people rise to the top. Why do average people fall for it? I mean, that would be I think that's a bigger problem, that we're lacking the numbers of leaders and strong individuals who are able to think for themselves and not be brainwashed by media. And if the populace had a higher number of strong individuals, then I think that these people would not rise to the top, and there would be more, let's say, running for office. But who wants to run for office when you get killed and slaughtered characterologically and attacked?
Absolutely.
So
and
that's another problem.
But I tell you what comes up for me again, like you're talking. So you've got the people who are told, like kids and right through the adolescent, that they're told they're great. They're there's all this, like you say, forgiveness, and they can't do anything wrong, and they can have anything they want, as in, make your dreams come true and all that kind of stuff. Now, what happens when you've got people, and I'm sure you've come across people like this, I have a lot in my life, when they are constantly told they're not good, or they shouldn't be doing the job, yet they are completely deaf to creative critique of, no, you're not doing this right. Even in high level jobs, I don't know if they still have those interviews every year to see how people are doing in governments and stuff. Because obviously governments are on my mind, because you look around and you think everyone's corrupt. Everyone is doing a bad, not, shouldn't say everyone, but they could do better, I'm sure. What do you think happens with people that constantly get told that they shouldn't be doing the job, but they just go and carry on doing a bad job?
You mean they're not bothered by the feedback or criticism?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there are those too, and I've always been fairly sensitive to feedback and criticism. I think most people are. I've always thought, thank God for it, because
so I
did stuff, and luckily I had a community that grabbed you by the neck and said, stop that. And so the boundaries set by the parents and the culture interrupts the inappropriate direction. But there are definitely people that aren't affected by what you think. They're immune, they're Teflon. They maybe that's why they rise to power, is because they're not sensitive to the feedback that a normal person would. No, I mean, who would want to? I think of politics as you're just wide open to brutal lies, personal attacks, because it's really about power. It's not about you. They want to destroy a viable candidate whose message might run counter to their ideology, let's say. And so they're willing. So if you're Teflon, if you don't care, maybe Trump's an example of that. He's so narcissistic that he's unaffected by the criticism. He just keeps charging ahead. He doesn't care. Bring it on. He'll argue with you.
And do you think so? And you do think that just being oblivious, it is a bit of an imbalance in, a mind that goes, well, I've had 1,000 people tell me I'm not doing this job very well, but I'm going to override that. There is something quite bizarre. I mean, in South Africa, you have like people that are just constantly doing a very bad job, but there's no, I think so. There's no self kind of, there's nothing going around the mind going, there's no feedback, there's no self feedback. Is that recognized as a psychological condition where people just don't feedback and recognize their own, kind of?
Well, there's two thoughts. One is that narcissistic self-defining, let's call them self-defining, because narcissistic is like a pejorative term. Nobody brags that they're a narcissist that I've ever met. But they're self-directed. A lot of leaders have these traits. They're unaffected by the criticism. They shed it and they move on. They have a vision. They're going to listen to themselves more than you, which, if you put it that way, that sounds like if you're in school and you think about cheating, then you realize that your answers are better than your classmates. And so you stay focused on yourself. You're not vulnerable to the belief that you think you're good enough. So a part of that grandiosity, or let's call it healthy self-esteem, would be, I'm up for this job. I can do this. The grandiose narcissist starts to believe, and this is called megalomania. You hear of megalomania in history, the leaders that are clearly psychotic. They're consumed with a destructive agenda, and away they go. Those are pathological people. But 20% of CEOs in the US have been deemed qualifying for narcissistic personality disorder. Okay, 20%.
That's a lot.
It's not 50%, but it is 20%, which struck me as quite a bit. But those traits are needed if you're going to lead and you're having people pick at you and pull at you and saying, don't go this way, go this way. No, that's crazy. I've got the right idea. Then you really, I'm getting a lot of telemarketer calls here. So I think you're right about it as a pathology, but it's also a strength. There is something, and typically these are men. This is a masculine trait, is to kind of go for it. There's something that you have confidence. You have built that confidence from experience. You are imbued with, I think I'm right. I'm going to do it. And then everybody's saying, go for it, go for it. You're my leader. You're my captain. You're my general. And so they go to the top. And if they're incompetent, and this is where systems have to work. If the system doesn't fire the bad general, we're in real trouble, because you don't want incompetent, grandiose narcissists running things. They do horrible damage. But they'll fool the average person. They look so great, they talk so great, they're so confident, but they're, what do you call it, a paper tiger or a wooden cutout.
Is this, what would you say, is this the, we're about to run out of time, but would you say that is an example of the patriarchal kind of society? That kind of go for it blindly, almost, that military or CEO just focused, and so that matriarchal love and compassion and kindness is almost absent, isn't it?
Yes, I think that is archetypal masculine / patriarchy, these traits that we're talking about, which are in opposition to kindness, acceptance. I'm not sure I'm right. Maybe some a willingness to check with other people, agreeableness, which is, if you're an agreeable person, you don't want to be the person to have everybody disagreeing with you, and then you're saying, well, I'm going to do it anyway. You're more likely to say, okay, we'll compromise and we'll do. So the compromising function would be more matriarchal, whereas the it's my way or the highway function or trait would be archetypally masculine or patriarchal.
Okay, brilliant. I could go on for a long time. We're about to kind of bring it all to an end. I have my little alarm on so we can finish up when we say we're going to finish up.